Hey everybody, welcome back to Winstead's Speed Labs. I want to continue to talk more about saddles and fitting and setting up your saddle. You can see here we're in the shop. Everything is nice and organized and clean and exactly where it should be. So like I've said before, a lot of fitters go by saddle tip set back from the center of the BB. And, this is not the best way to use a measurement because most of us aren't very good at running a plumb bob, and a lot of floors are not completely level, and if the floor is not level, then it's all messed up. So what I actually came up with, and using saddle setback from the tip, is put the rear tire against a wall, right? So you could just say that's a wall. And make sure that the wall is obviously straight up and down, and the bike needs to be straight up and down. The bike needs to be straight against the wall. And then you measure from the wall to the front tip of the saddle. You take that number, and then you measure from the wall to the center of the BB, which you can just use the highest point of diameter from the crank hole there and subtract the numbers, and that's going to give you a really close setback from your bottom bracket. So let's say you go and you get a retool fit and they give you that printout, which is based on a computer and lasers, and then you come home and let's say you want to set up another bike to the same fit as your retool fit. Well, you can use that way to measure your setback to put your saddle in the same place on the other bike. The problem with that is, what if the saddle is not the same? Well, then none of that matters because you're using a different saddle, and where you sit on the saddle is going to be different than the other one, and you can no longer use that number anymore. So that's why I really like using the anatomical center, that whole 7 centimeters from the 7 centimeters wide from one side to the other. And then you could really use that number as your new setback number instead of from the tip of the saddle. So you want to put the calipers like this, and from this back edge would be your 7 centimeters, and you put your tape right there. And then on the new bike or the other bike with your other saddle, you put this tape also right there, and then you can measure from the wall. But there's really no need to measure from the wall. Actually, yes, there is, because you need to go from the bottom bracket. So if you got 2 bikes, like I have one in Costa Rica, and I want it to fit exactly the same or as close as I can to the one in USA, you need to use the bottom bracket as your reference point for your fore and aft position on the saddle. Obviously, that makes a big impact on how you feel on the bike. So say this saddle's in Costa Rica, get my point there, USA bike point here, and then do what I said before and measure from the wall, and that's going to give you your setback. Now, if I was just going to change this saddle for this saddle on this bike, then I can use a point up here. Like just the past couple of weeks, I've just been using just a little point in here somewhere that I can measure every time over and over. And I'll go from there and I'll measure back to my 7 centimeters. So when I put this saddle on here, I just take that measurement again, put it the same. Then I use my velo angle thing and get my saddle height. the same, and then I'm in the same position, and it's super fast to do it that way. Then when you're out on the road, you can be like 1 millimeter off and the bike doesn't feel right. And really, I'm super sensitive to fit and changes in the fit. Some people aren't. I think it just has to do with how much you've ridden in your life and how anal you are about just little things that can bug you. But one thing I like to do is, like, if you're out on the road and you feel like you want to change the saddle height, you can screw yourself up on a long ride by you loosen the clamp and you start trying to change the height, and then all of a sudden it drops high or low too fast, and then you lost where you were. I like to just take like a little knife and just score the seat tube just so slightly like that. And that gives me like, okay, that's where I am right now. Now, if I'm out on a ride on this new saddle, I can use this as a guide to get me up or down 1 millimeter. And normally, if you use that method I was showing you, you're only going to be off, say, 1 or 2 millimeters on a ride. And that way you can change it while you ride and feel the difference. And, you know, you can get a new saddle and be like, oh, I don't like how this feels. The saddle's not comfortable. But if you change it, if you go up or down 1 millimeter, you change the angle, say half a degree, it can really change how the saddle feels. And it can go from not being a comfortable saddle to being fine, just because every saddle's different. If I put all my weight on this saddle, you can see this saddle is super stiff. So I've got 738 millimeters from the center of the BB to my set point. Well, I weigh 170 something pounds. When I sit on it, if it's super stiff, then that number is going to pretty much maintain the same. Whereas the saddle I was riding, the S-Works Roman Evo Mirror, I had ridden it so much that when I would sit on it, it would deflect down probably a good 5 millimeters. So that shows you, like, one saddle to the other, you can't just go off a concrete set number. That's just to give you a good home point, and then you have to mess with it on the road and get it exactly where you want it. And then if the saddle's still not comfortable after you've played with it on some rides, then maybe it's time to send it back and try a different one. So yeah, that's just some more of my thoughts from the Speed Lab. Thanks.